Greetings, bike packers, gravel grinders, and any other cyclists who prefer it long, hard, and dirty. I am Kevin Lee with Spinistry, and this is our bike packing tutorial series presented by Spinistry, Section 1 Fitness. And just want to give a quick overview of where we're going with this module, and throughout it, we'll talk about where the others are leading as well. But to be honest with you, we've kind of come full circle of what our original plan was. Kicking off the series, the original plan was to dive straight into the equipment, the toys, the cool stuff that everyone wants to play with. And we were going to make fitness the final chapter, module, whatever you want to call it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that's the primary tool to make this work. What we've seen is that a lot of people don't actually buy into that. And we want to help people go the right way, because unfortunately too many people don't realize the importance of the fitness, and quite frankly what that does, it reduces their opportunities to go out there and have fun with these types of adventures. No, we're not talking about being trained up to circumvent the globe on a bicycle and being able to get by on 20 minutes sleep a day type fitness. That's not what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is what is realistic for a cycling and outdoors hobbyist to pull off while they're working full time and spending time with their families the way they want to. In this particular video, we're going to outline the logistics of a recent bikepacking group outing that we coordinated and show how a basic training plan kind of formulates and makes that work for just about anyone. We're going to share a very simple training plan that makes sense for most non-competitive, that's key, most non-competitive riders that want to do these types of adventures. And I'm going to demonstrate a sample schedule based on that methodology realistically for my own training needs. We'll dive fairly deeply into that, and I have some special requirements, so to speak, that I'm working around, and hopefully what I'm dealing with shows that realistically this type of plan works for just about anyone. So I'm gonna demonstrate that sample schedule based on my needs, and that's going to allow anyone else to customize their plans for their own needs and where they're at in their current fitness. At the end of this video, you will be fully prepared to put together your own training plans based on this methodology and get prepared for the types of adventures that we're talking about in this series, but that you want to do on your own anyway, because you wouldn't be coming to this video if you weren't already interested in this type of adventure. So that's the quick overview. Right now, what I'm going to do is we'll make this brief, but I think this tangible example helps pull all the pieces together that we'll be talking about later. So we recently, the end of January 2021, had a group trip to Big Bend National Park, where we helped coordinate a couple of groups that were bike packing Big Bend National Park, and almost everyone there, it was their first time bike packing there. I think there were there were definitely several people it was their first time bike packing at all. And the basic logistics were this: we put together a looped route for a 2-day weekend of riding. The total loop was roughly 81 miles. We'll call it 80 miles to make it simple. And the logistics of it worked out for 40-mile days. And it was not the most difficult riding in the world, but it definitely was not easy. This is definitely something that's beyond the capabilities of someone who hasn't been training at all for it. This is not a grab your bike and go for the weekend and let's have fun bike packing type adventure. And that's kind of the point of this module. There are very few of those that exist. Essentially, the first step is you have to be able to ride your bike to do these things even some fairly basic ones, you still need to be fit enough to pull it off and not make yourself miserable. And I'm outlining this because I would not consider any of our riders for this Big Bend trip to be world-class level athletes by any stretch. And that's not putting down. They were all very tough. They were all very determined. They all did very well. And yes, nobody bailed. Everybody pulled it off. But I didn't expect anyone to bail. There was some tough slogging for both groups, and I'll talk about the two different groups here in a bit. But I think everyone had an extremely rewarding weekend. So the basic structure was this 80-mile loop, 40 miles a day. We had Camp 1, North Camp, that was just off the main park road. And then we had Camp 2, our South Camp, which was at the Rio Grande Village. The North Camp was a primitive camping site just off the main park road. Rio Grande Village was a more traditional campsite where like all the RVers park and things like that. So there was toilet facilities, a store down here. Up here at Handle Draw, this was just primitive camping. It was a place to put up a tent and spend the night sort of place. To be perfectly honest with you, I much preferred the primitive site. We had it all to ourselves. The traditional site, the campsites were right next to each other, and people were making noise and that kind of stuff. The primitive site was just absolutely amazing. I'm outlining this basic structure because I think it would work for anybody that would be interested in this type of Big Bend National Park trip. The basic route was, let's throw on the terrain map here. There we go. Our group 1 was what we call our supported group. They started from the north site. Group 2 was self-supported. They started from the south site. They both did the same loop, but on Saturday morning, the supported group went clockwise and the self-supported group went counterclockwise. And the idea would be for all the riders to pass each other during the day. And I was also going to position myself in the Spinistry mobile somewhere in the middle to hand off water, root beer, whatever else, and check on the riders if anyone needed assistance, sort of thing. So the basic structure is leaving from the Handle Draw campsite, take the main park road for about 7 or 8 miles. It's a nice warm up pavement. And then you catch the Dagger Flats Road and you're on a dirt road from there. And off of Dagger Flats, and ignore the mileage because it's showing the mileage for the group going the other direction. At Dagger Flats, you turn onto Old Ore Road. And this is kind of where the adventure begins. Old Ore Road is definitely, it's not a mountain bike trail. It's a Jeep trail, for lack of a better term. Pretty much any four-wheel drive vehicle with decent clearance can pull it off. Probably even a Subaru would be my guess. Depending though, there's a couple of tough little stretches on it, and anytime weather comes into play, new washouts could be there, things like that. I'm just using that to kind of paint a picture of what the terrain is. This Dagger Flats Road is just a regular dirt road. Once you turn onto Old Ore Road, it becomes a more primitive, rougher mountain bike trail type stuff. Well, Jeep trail type stuff. But it's a fantastic road. And this kind of winds along here. And you have around McKinney Springs here, you have a really fun down and up section, winds through the mountains. But generally speaking, it's mostly downhill for the clockwise riders. The self-supported riders, it's an uphill day for them almost all day long. And that's the one thing about this route. When you're going north to south, you're going downhill. When you're going south to north, you're going uphill. So there's no way around it. That's just generally the way the route works. And then after 40 miles or so of some really fantastic riding, catch a short stretch of pavement and head into the Rio Grande campground. We'll go to satellite mode here. And I believe our campsite was right here. And the way it worked, this campsite it was like a pie wedge. And they're not spacing the campsites every other campsite. They're just closing half of the loop. So everybody's packed in together. Anyway, enough of that editorial. So day 2, it just went the opposite. So Saturday night, Friday night, the self-supported riders slept here. Saturday night, the supported riders slept here. And Sunday morning, supported riders went this way, back towards their original camp. And the self-supported riders came this way. Again, meeting along the way and to hand off cold drinks and attaboys and all that good stuff. So it was an 80-mile weekend, 40 miles a day. It was definitely not flat, typical Texas type riding. But it wasn't, climbing up Everest straight up type riding either. It was a long day of a general uphill slope one day and a long day of a general downhill slope the other, and sprinkled in between, there would be, little ups and downs that you had to, climb a short, steep climb, but, the other side was a short, steep descent, ear to ear fun sort of thing. I paint this picture because, again, none of these participants were world-class athletes. About half of them had been bikepacking before, a couple of them pretty extensive bikepacking background, but most of the people, this was their first true bikepacking trip. They may have done a camping trip with their bicycle along the way, sort of thing, and maybe a shakedown ride, but a true bikepacking adventure. This was kind of their starting point. Realistically, having the capability to do something like that is kind of where I feel most people should be before they start taking bikepacking adventures. That doesn't mean you can't go bikepacking if you're not up to that fitness level yet. Don't take it that way. Go out and have fun and do the things that you enjoy. But realistically, if you're going to take bikepacking seriously, if you're going to start investing in the equipment and things like that, because it's a lot of money if you go that route. But it doesn't make sense to make those investments for one trip a year that maybe if all the stars align and you get lucky, and we're gonna touch on the luck aspect of this further on, that you're able to pull off. You want to be positioned from a fitness perspective that whenever the opportunity arises to go on an adventure, whether it's a bikepacking adventure or just a long weekend of riding, or heck, maybe something happens and you've got a Wednesday off and the family's out of town and you've got some buddies that want to go lay down a quick century ride or something like that. Just being able to take advantage of those opportunities just requires a basic level of fitness that isn't that difficult to pull off. Okay, so now we're going to go into the training outline in general. We'll get into some detail. I'm sure folks will have questions, and please add those in the comments or email us or whatever else. But the nuts and bolts of this are it's meant to be as simple and straightforward as possible. First off, let's talk again about why fitness is number one in our bikepacking tutorial series. And I want to emphasize, this is not elitism. It's essential. We're not saying, oh, if you're not fit enough to ride, you shouldn't go bikepacking. That's not what we're trying to say. What we're saying is if you're not fit enough to go off on these adventures, quite frankly, you're not going to have any fun. And your opportunities to partake in these adventures are going to be extremely limited. Luck is preparation coinciding with opportunity. Basically, it takes a lot of work to be lucky. That's true in life. I'm not a believer in luck. I'm a believer in timing coincidence, and timing coincidence means that you're actually prepared to take advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself. The reality is to go off on adventures like this, if you're setting some long distant carrot up as your goal to be able to pull off a bike packing trip, and well, I'll train up for it when I have the time when it gets closer, yada yada yada. Realistically, for the vast majority of us, that's never going to work out. Life's going to get in the way. You're going to have overtime at work, so you're not going to be able to train up for that specific date or whatever else. So what makes more sense is to be able to take advantage of the opportunities for these adventures whenever they present themselves. It doesn't mean don't plan for that big trip down the road. You want to set those goals and have something to look forward to. But if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, you are potentially setting yourself up for disappointment. And the reality is fitness is it's a fundamental safety requirement to go off on these adventures. It doesn't make sense to attempt that Big Bend loop that we highlighted earlier if you're not adequately prepared for it physically. And along those lines, the reality is, as far as a loop at Big Bend National Park goes, that's about as easy of a loop as you can get out there. So if you're wanting to go bike packing in Big Bend National Park and do a loop, you need to be able to be physically capable to pull off what we outlined there at a minimum. Now, does that mean that if you're not up to that level of fitness yet, that you can't go out to Big Bend National Park and enjoy camping and riding your bike? Of course not. You can get a primitive site along River Road and use that as a base camp, and you know go out for 10 or 15 miles a day on River Road and come back to the camp or whatever else. The point is, if you're wanting to do a true bike packing loop excursion where you're not doubling back on the same ground, uh, that one we laid out, that's probably as simple as you can get without it just being a pavement loop of some sort. Here's the main part of the fitness aspect of it: knowing your capabilities. When you train up, when you go into training, you have a pretty solid idea of what you can do. You don't have an idea of what you can't do yet because, quite frankly, you don't know your limits until you cross that line and find your limits. And at that time, it's too late. If you find your limits, you're done. You're in the hole. You can't come back from that. So it makes more sense to be trained up and know what's within your capabilities. We never suggest that people should ride beyond their capabilities. Way back in the day, I worked at a dive shop that we specialized in cave diving. And one of the basic tenets of cave diving is, well, you're in a cave, you're underwater, you can't go to the limit of your air supply, 50% or 51%, and think you're going to make it back out. Well, I'll just use half my air and then turn around and come back. Well, what if something goes wrong? So, like, the basic rule for cave divers along those lines is a third of your air in, a third of your air out, and then you have a third of your air for the unexpected or emergencies or whatever else. Realistically, endurance cycling should be along the same approach. You shouldn't use up 50%, 80%, 98.7% of your energy to get from point A to point B. You should use up, a third of your energy to get from point A to point B. That saves a third to set up camp, cook meals, do whatever else, and not be miserable. And then, if needed, there's still energy reserves in case you have that catastrophic mechanical breakdown and you have to walk your bike for 20 miles or something like that. Or you have to go help somebody else that's in trouble. You can leave camp and pedal to somebody else and take an extra tube with you or so, whatever. Know your capabilities, because when you find your limits, you're too far committed at that point. Proper trip planning. Fitness is very key to that. Again, this ties back to knowing your capabilities. If you know that you're capable of doing a 40-mile day at Big Bend National Park, generally speaking, if you know your fitness is up to that, you're gonna plan your trips accordingly. If you don't know what your capabilities are, it's real easy to bite off more than you can chew, and that goes back to the safety. Safety is key to all of this, and the reality of fitness. And again, this is safety. Others are depending on you most of the time. Very few people go out on these adventures by themselves, but some do. I get that. But even if you're doing a solo trip out in the woods, you still have family and friends back home that are counting on you to get back safe and do the responsible things along the way. So there's always others depending on you, even if you're off on a solo trip. But most of us, when we go off on these trips, there are other riders as well. And if you overcommit physically to a trip or an event, and you're stranded 20 miles from the camp, and there's no cell service or whatever else, and there's a half a dozen people at camp starting to worry about you, even if you're not sick or hurt, but you're just where you can't ride any further or ride really really slowly, stopping every 20 minutes or so to rest. Those people are going to worry about you. They're going to be concerned. Somebody's going to go off, and maybe they're over their limits and they should be resting, but somebody's going to come back maybe in the middle of the night without proper lighting to try to come find you. Again, safety is key. Fitness is an integral part of safety, and that's just being courteous to the group, is to ride within your capabilities. The final part of it is the whole point is for these adventures to be fun. You don't want to make yourself miserable just to say, oh, hey, I was able to pull off that 70-mile day. I was able to pull off that 35-mile super mountainous day. But gee, I was wiped out and I couldn't move for 2 days afterwards. There's always going to be challenges along the way. And if you're doing it properly, you're going to feel it at the end of a ride. You should. But you shouldn't be wiped out, and you shouldn't be halfway into it and just doing everything but crying for each pedal stroke to keep moving forward. If you're miserable doing this, most people, I realize there's some people that enjoy misery, but most people don't enjoy misery. The point is to have fun, and to make sure you have fun, you have to have the proper fitness level to accomplish that. Yes, the biggest objection, I get it. Everybody says this. I don't have the time to train. And this whole program, it's not the right word, because it's a plan. A program isn't the right approach, but this is built specifically around people not having a lot of time to train. And we're going to show you that it doesn't take a whole lot of time commitment to pull it off. Now, if you have absolutely zero time to train, I get it. Some people, that is where they are at in their lives. You can still enjoy camping and riding your bicycle and combining those two things together. Possibly even make pseudo bikepacking trips for very short distances. The reality is, if you're not up to this kind of basic fitness level, I'm not here to dissuade you from taking your bike and camping gear and setting up in the woods and riding 5 miles the next day, and setting up camp 5 miles down. That's perfectly fine. If your long-term goal is to do more adventurous type trips, longer distance trips and things like that, my recommendation would actually be take your camping gear, set up a base camp somewhere, and then don't tear down and set up every day. Just use that as a base camp. And that weekend, just maintain your training regimen by riding your bicycle from that base camp and back to it each day. So, instead of tearing down and setting up, go ahead and, take that time and put an extra hour or two on the bike each day, sort of thing. Something to consider. Again, we're not telling you what to do. Everybody has different ways to have fun doing these things. We're showing people that are interested in building up to a true bike packing adventure capability, what I think might be some of the better ways to accomplish it. Most people that are saying they don't have time to train actually do have time to train. They just need to shift the emphasis of different parts of their day to allow for a little bit of training. And it doesn't take a lot at all. If you can't meet our minimum suggested hours, it's not hard and fast, but we're just trying to paint a picture of what it takes to pull this off. And along those lines, realistically, we're talking 6 hours a week. If you can consistently train 6 hours a week at a very basic structure, a couple months, few months down the road, I'm confident anybody could do that Big Bend trip. We'll show you how some of that kind of breaks down. But first, I want to explain what this program, plan, whatever you want to call it, what it isn't. This is not race training. I want to emphasize that. If you're competitive, if you're looking for race training, that's not what this is. Here's another thing this isn't. It's not painful. The old adage is no pain, no gain. Well, not a believer in that, to be perfectly honest with you. Pain's going to come here and there along the way. But the reality is, if you're training with pain, realistically, ultimately, that's going to probably lead to burnout. The point is to have fun, and you can definitely train in a fun way that doesn't tear apart your body and keep going day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out at this pace and building on it if it works out for you. But if it doesn't work out for you, if all you can ever do is the 6 hours a week, that's going to be fine. You're always going to be positioned to take advantage of those opportunities we touched on earlier. The reality is if you're running into pain regularly, at some point you're going to hurt yourself and you're going to be off the bike. And it could be for an extended period of time. And then you have to start all over from scratch. This has not been put together by a professional coach or trainer. I want to emphasize that. I am not a trained professional. I have slept at a Holiday Inn Express. And also what I have done is used this basic structure a few times along the way to get my fitness back up to speed, including being able to do most of the Rat 1000 after being hit by a car. We'll touch on that later. I did not complete the Rat 1000. I think I did like 550, 575 miles. That wasn't a physical limitation. That's a whole different module that we'll talk about somewhere down the road. The multi-day stuff, that's more of a mental challenge than a physical challenge. And where I got to on the Rat, my whole goal was to see if I could even viably do it. I had, again, finding your limits. If you find your limits, you've gone too far. My point of doing the Rat was because, we knew people, we'd been sending people on it for several years and people were pulling it off. I honestly didn't know if I was capable of doing it myself. Getting most of the way into it proved to me that, pretty confident I could have pulled it off. And that was my focus goal. And I got to that. And then other things got into my head. That's the problem with the multi-day events. Things get in your head. And when you're out there for 100 miles a day, pedal stroke after pedal stroke after pedal stroke, we call them quit monsters. They just they get in your head and they just keep getting bigger and bigger because you just dwell on them. Now that said, it probably was still the best move for me to not finish the Rat that year. And I don't regret stopping when I did. And somewhere down the road, I'll do the 1,000 miles. But be honest with you, it's just not a priority for me. The priority was to see if I was capable of doing it. The same thing applies to this day-to-day training, but in a much more smaller scale, a much more limited scale. But it's also a manageable scale to start building up to those super tough challenges as well. One of the things that's, about this plan is it's going to take some mental toughness to stick to the plan. It's not really difficult, but it's really simple, really easy to move away from it. So discipline and dedication are part of it. And discipline and dedication are key to any of these types of adventures and training for them and that sort of thing. This plan gives a really basic structure that helps reinforce building discipline in that manner. This is not scientifically verified by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not going to pretend that it is. Pieces of it I kind of did on my own. Along the way, I did get some coaching for the rat prior to being hit by the car. And that coaching actually kind of was very similar to the methodology I had used myself prior, but a little bit more structured. So I've incorporated some of that structure into this plan. But the basic framework is nothing scientific about it. It's just common sense, to be perfectly honest with you. And this plan is not for sale. Use it, take advantage of it, or not. If it doesn't work for you, that's perfectly fine. It's a suggestion, and it's something that works for me. And I'm confident it will work for others as well. But I'm not saying, oh, here, give me your money and I'll show you how to get trained up for these types of adventures. Nope, here it is. It's free. Use it or not. And that's perfectly fine. Our basic training structure is what we call tell, show, do. And so we tell you what we're going over, show you how to do it, and then you do it yourselves. That's the structure that we're working with here. So right now we're in the tell part. No secrets, no hidden pieces. No, well, I'm going to show you 80% of it, but send me $50 and you'll get the other 20%. Or no, this is, there's no secrets, and we might miss pieces that need some clarification, and maybe we'll do some updates with other videos or things like that. And hey, we may figure out that, that didn't work for other people the way that worked for me. So maybe we need to adjust it for others. So there may be adjustments along the way. I'm also the show part is I'm going to show you my own program that I'm putting together for me to get back on the bike. And we'll go into more detail on that shortly. And we'll keep up on an ongoing basis with my own personal results. Some people are going to be seeing this video when we first launch it. Some people are going to be seeing this video 2 years down the road, maybe even longer. Who knows? First time this goes out, we're starting from scratch. Down the road, people are going to know, quite frankly, if I made any progress or not. And so in the long run, I expect more people to come back to this and start following it, as opposed to start following it from the get-go when we first publish the video. And the do part. The whole point is for this to be simple enough for anyone to follow and adapt to your own current fitness levels, where you're at now, and how to take it where you want to be. And again, there's no secrets. So after this video, you'll be able to start doing this if you want to. And we'll make arrangements for people that maybe want some personalized clarification, how to do some things along those lines if needed. Hopefully we lay it out where you don't need that clarification, something you can take what you see on this video and work from there. And this is the key to everything. And anyone that's ever looked into any cycling training, tried to structure it themselves, you've probably heard about building the base. And that's all this training plan is about. It's about building the base. Competitive cyclists, and this isn't made for racers. Competitive cyclists are going to just go, oh, well, yeah, you got to start with the base. Well, not everybody understands that. You have to have a base level of fitness that's always there. And all that takes is saddle time. And all the saddle time takes is some basic discipline. Again, this is not for racing. If you're a racer, seriously, go get a racing coach. We're going to assume you already have a base, and that coach is going to design a plan specific to your shortcomings for racing or where you want to be. If you think you might want to be a racer somewhere down the road, go ahead and start with this, build that base, and once your base is established, reach out to a coach, and you'll come across people along the way that are using racing coaches. And that's the biggest thing about finding a coach. There's lots of good coaches out there. But there's lots of good coaches that are not the right fit for everyone. And the base is very basic. Your goal is to ride 60 minutes every day. Yeah, you heard me right. 60 minutes every day. And depending on what your current fitness level is or what your day may deliver, sometimes you have more time, sometimes you have less time. Realistically, as long as you have 45 minutes to spare for riding, go ahead and get at least that 45-minute ride in. Generally speaking, your daily base ride, you don't want to go any longer than 90 minutes. And I know there's going to be people that with a decent fitness level now that are, well, I ride 2 hours every time I ride, or I ride 3 hours every. That's fine. I'm not telling you to stop doing that. What I'm saying is those days that you're not riding now, go ahead and ride those off days and get in 60 minutes that day. And here's the most important part about it: not at max effort at all. These 60 minutes every day rides, you should be able to just pedal at a casual pace. If you're breathing hard, if you can't talk, you're doing too hard. The point is to turn those pedals every day. Again, if you're already riding and a couple days a week you're racing or going all out with your friends on a mountain bike trail or whatever else, or hammering it hard on a group ride, that's fine. Keep doing that. We're not telling you not to. It's just those days that you're not riding, throw those into the mix. The point is there's no scheduled off days. If the day allows for it, and sometimes you're going to have to stretch for it, make a point to ride every day that you can. Don't plan for an off day. Life is going to make those happen anyway. We all have to deal with it. And I'm not saying be guilty if you aren't able to ride. The expectation is days are going to come up that you're not able to ride, and every week that's going to happen. If you can make it 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month without an off day, that's fantastic. You're able to do that with this plan. Worst case scenario is if you're feeling tired, you ride a 60-minute day where you're just tooling around the neighborhood at an extremely casual pace, literally just turning your legs. And that's a rest day right there. Most likely, you're not going to be able to make day after day after. Something's going to happen. Kid's going to be sick. You're going to have to travel. You can't, or whatever else. So you want the 60 minutes every day at a pretty casual pace. You do want one long ride per week. And long ride's going to be relative. I'm not saying a long ride is 90 minutes. I'm not saying it's 2 hours. I'm not saying it's 6 hours. Generally speaking, 2 to 3 hours, unless you're already riding a one long day a week. I get it. There's lots of people out there that every weekend they do one long ride, 6 hours, 4 hours. And during the week, maybe they ride once or twice during the week as well. And that's what they do. Keep doing what you're doing. Again, just throw those 60-minute days in there in between all of those others. I'm not asking you to change up what your current schedule is at all. This is the key. And again, it's about the discipline aspect of it. Make a point to ride when you don't want to. And it's really easy to get trapped into that. It's like, I rode for 17 days in a row. I can take a day off, even though the opportunity's there to ride that day. Take that opportunity to ride that day because, again, you don't know when your spouse is going to get sick and you're not able to ride for a week or whatever else. When you can ride, you make yourself ride even if you're not feeling it. I can guarantee you 5 minutes into the ride, you're going to be thanking yourself. Yes, up until that point, you're going, I really don't want to do this. 5 minutes into the ride, you go, I'm glad I did this. You're going to get to that point very quickly if you're not there already. This helps tremendously. I know not everyone believes in them or thinks it's not for them, whatever else. Sometimes it is really, really tough to find that 60 minutes. Realistically, if you have a smart trainer or a regular trainer, rollers, spin bike, anything that's set up and ready to go at a moment's notice, almost all of us can find an hour or 45 minutes, again, at least 45 minutes in the course of a day just to hop on the trainer or the rollers and just spin. No, that's not the most enjoyable approach for most people. but it is completely practical. And the reality is, for most of us, it's a lot more practical than trying to go get in a 60-minute mountain bike ride a day. Because, what all is involved in riding a mountain bike every day? Well, you have to pack up your gear, go to the trailhead, unload, gear up, ride, take off your gear, load the car back up, go back home. Just the going back and forth aspect of it turns a 60-minute ride into at least 2, maybe 3 hours of your day. If you're able just to, hey, the exercise bike the spin bike's there, I can just hop on it and do it. Get into that habit. And if you don't have that as a tool yet, I highly recommend it. Put that on the top of your shopping list. Most bicycle riders are in N+1 mode anyway, always looking for justification to get that next bike. If you don't have a smart trainer yet, for most people, I do highly recommend, instead of buying that next multi-$1,000 bike, or at least over $1,000 bike, it probably makes more sense to go ahead and invest in a smart trainer and start using one of the software platforms. Again, not for everyone. I think it works best for most people. You can get the old-fashioned trainers, the dumb trainers. Just put the wheel on it and go. You can pick up a used one for 25 or 30 bucks. Not a lot of fun, I'll be perfectly honest with you, but you can push through for 45 minutes an occasional day here or there. Personally, I had better luck with rollers. They were more engaging for me, but there is a risk factor there. You can definitely fall over on rollers. There is a learning curve with the rollers. It's kind of along the lines of clipless pedals. It takes a while to get truly comfortable with it, but once you're there, it just becomes second nature. Spin bikes, we've tried that one as well, and that actually worked pretty well for just hopping on and going. For me personally, spin bikes were not the best approach, but nothing against them at all. I think for some people, they're a really good fit. And there's probably other options out there that I'm not thinking of. And to be perfectly honest with you, even if it's just rolling around your neighborhood for 60 minutes a day, just out of your garage, roll around the neighborhood and back to your garage, that's a fantastic way to do it. And we've already touched that. If you're already ahead of basically 6 hours a week of training, fantastic. You're probably ready to go on that Big Bend trip we outlined before. But if you want to take your fitness to that next level, again, just throw in the 60 minutes a day on top of what you're doing now. And that's really going to take you next level. And we're going to talk about some mathematic generalities here for having an idea of what your capabilities are along those lines. If you do your 6 hours a week, and that's your average weekly hours after 12 weeks, realistically, most people should be able to do back-to-back performance days of 6 hours a day without any issue. If you're training 6 hours a week and you do that continuously for 12 weeks, and even if you haven't done a 6-hour ride any one of those days in that 12 weeks, realistically, you've probably built up your fitness where you can take a weekend adventure trip, ride 6 hours on Saturday, not be miserable, and be able to get back on the bike and ride 6 hours on Sunday as well. Now, is it going to be a full-out bike packing adventure with 40 pounds of gear? And that's a different, I'm not going to say yes, I'm not going to say no. Different people with different equipment and different bicycles and different loads, and that's a different variable there. But if you wanted to do that base camp approach like I was talking about, to just try it out, prove me wrong, I dare you. Go out to the forest, set up a base camp Friday night, ride your bike for 6 hours, come back to that base camp, spend the night Saturday night, go out for another ride Sunday for 6 hours, pack up and go home. And I bet you're going to be able to pull that off without any problem. And to take it to that next level where this actually like becomes RAT 1000 type training, again, we're just talking about the 6 hours a week. If you do that for 24 weeks, 12 weeks times 2, then you are actually probably positioned to do 2 times your weekly average each day. So 12 hours a day if you're doing your 6 hours per week. And you can probably pull that off for 5 days plus. Ask me how I know. I think we touched on that a little bit earlier. Again, these are some general rules of thumb, but hopefully it paints a picture, gives people a reference point of what the training can set them up for in the long run. And again, if you're already ahead of that curve on the 6 hours a week, just apply that same math to your hourly riding or your weekly riding. So if you're throwing the extra 60 minutes a day takes you up to 10 hours a week of riding, let's say, well, after 12 weeks, you're good for back-to-back days of 10 hours. And after 24 weeks, you're good for realistically 20-hour days. That's getting into the realm of impossibility for 5 days, though. But if you wanted to pull off a 24-hour race, for example, you would probably be positioned to do that after 24 weeks at 10 hours a week. It's that simple. You would definitely be positioned to do the RAT and put in 10-hour days for a week or more. So some basic math there, just a basic reference point. Again, basically around building the base. All right, so I said I'm going to show you what a plan would work, how a plan would lay out based on where I'm at and me getting back into shape. So first off, we're going to start with where Kevin is at presently, and it's not pretty. This is quite ugly. I have, for various reasons, been off the bike for about 3 years now. A couple of short little spurts in there where I tried to get back on, but nothing for more than a couple, 3 weeks at a time, sort of thing. So I'm 3 years off the bike. It's that simple. I just had knee surgery that should allow me to get back on the bike February 3rd, 2021. And today is February 12th. I am extremely overweight. I'm not going to delve too far into it, but it's a lot. Combination of the knees really bothering me and COVID-19 definitely impacting our weekly business operations and not doing nearly as much as I was used to for setting up and tearing down events and things like that, going to meetings, whatever else, loading and unloading the trailer, all that good stuff. I was pretty sedentary for most of 2020. So I am not fit in any stretch of the imagination. I also, as a result of being hit by a car, which is the core of where I'm at now in a way, I do have issues with riding in traffic right now. Just it's not in my head to do that at the moment, and it's not a goal to overcome that. If I'm able to overcome that somewhere down the road, fantastic. I bring it up because just grabbing the bike and going for rides around my neighborhood or down the road and that's probably not a viable solution for me. So that's something I have to work with and I have to work around. So along those lines, I do have a smart trainer. It's an older one. It's a cheaper one. But it is one I've been using for several years and I'm familiar with it and I'm comfortable with it and I'm confident that it'll do what I need it to do. So at least at the very beginning, I'm going to be very focused on using indoor riding to accomplish my weekly goals. I don't have a specific long-term goal. at this point. It's the goal is to follow this plan as closely as I can. And we'll do check-ins along the way to verify that, hey, I said after 12 weeks you should be able to do this, and we're gonna try it out ourselves. We'll have a 12-week real world checkup, probably a 24-week real world checkup. Definitely the first 12 weeks, I'm going to stick to the 6 hours, even if I'm able time-wise to throw more into it. I don't know that I will be, but I'm gonna try really hard to stick to that 6 hour plan. Just to see how hard it is to stay 6 hours per week, and I don't want to go outside of that and start putting in 10, 12 hours a week and say, oh, look where I'm at, sort of thing. And I don't know that I would be able to do the 10 to 12 hours a week, to be perfectly honest with you. And the next video that I'm going to edit into this will be my specific training plan on the calendar. And it's not, we're going to do a little bit of build up for me personally, because I'm starting from absolute zero. The expectation is that 99% of the people watching this video already have some level of cycling fitness, or already riding a bicycle somewhat regularly, or they wouldn't be interested in bikepacking to begin with. Okay, so here's the preliminary training plan calendar I've put together, and I'm calling it preliminary because, again, I'm literally starting from zero. Just had knee surgery, so I need to run it by my doctor to make sure it's not going to create any issues. I don't expect it to, but until I clear it with him, we're going to call it preliminary. And part of the preliminary also is just for me to start spinning on the smart trainer again, which I actually have done the past couple of days. Pretty comfortable with the results so far. Again, I'm just getting the legs moving at this point. So what I'm going to try to ramp up for a couple of weeks before I do actually start the 6 hour a week plan. So the plan from the 10th through the 20th is just to get on the smart trainer and ride it for 15 to 30 minutes a day at an extremely casual pace. Make sure the knee's holding up, make sure it's not creating any aggravation. I don't expect it to, but yada, yada, yada. If that goes smoothly, the next week I'll ramp it up to 45-minute days. And then on the 28th of February is the plan to start the 6 hours a week plan, like I've laid out to everyone in the preceding video. One thing I want to bring up that we didn't touch on in the other stuff, particularly for people that are already trained up and people that are specifically interested in bikepacking, one thing we didn't talk about is training under load. That should be part of the equation after your initial 6 hour buildup. You do need to, particularly if you plan on doing multi-day bikepacking adventures loaded, you don't want the bikepacking trip to be the first time you take your bike out loaded. But in turn, you also don't want to train every day fully loaded as well. So the recommendation for most people, once you get through this first 12 weeks at 6 hours a week, recommendation would be for most people, one of those training days each week, maybe two, just the regular 60-minute session. Do that on a loaded bike if you're able to. Particularly if you're doing bikepacking on mountain bike trails with a mountain bike, you definitely want to get in saddle time, just getting familiar with how the bike handles on mountain bike trails. Yes, gravel bikes, it applies as well, but that's really more about just pushing a load up a hill sort of thing, getting familiar with how it turns a little bit differently. But if you're bikepacking on a mountain bike, you definitely want to, after you get this core base established, and if you already have it established, just make that one of your 60-minute rides each week to to add a loaded ride into it. And then maybe once every 4 to 6 weeks, if you're not bike packing on a regular basis, do one of your longer rides loaded, sort of thing. But anyway, back to my training plan. Starting February 28th, we start the 6 hour, goes into 12 weeks, 60 minutes a day. Realize full and well that we're not going to be able to ride every day. Life is going to happen. So if a week turns out to be 5 hours during the course of the week, that's fine. You don't try to make up time for missed days. Missed days are missed days. What you do try to do is find every way possible to avoid a missed day. If it comes down to it and you can't make a day, you take it off. And again, we're shooting for 6 hours a week. There's 7 days in a week. That builds the expectation that one of those 7 days isn't going to allow for a ride. And yes, life happens. If it ends up being 2 or 3 days in a week, that's fine. That just rolls into that 12-week average we were talking about. So you may not have a 6 hour average after 12 weeks if you've had a few weeks with 2 or 3 days off. Maybe it takes you down to a 5 hour average or whatever. So it's not the end of the world if you're not able to ride. Just try to instill that habit of creating the discipline to force yourself to ride, because there's going to be enough in life that happens that prevents you from riding. So we'll go through the first 6 weeks, which takes us from March into mid-April, actually to April 10th. That's going to be 6 weeks. And my plan is to just stick to the 60-minute rides per day up until this point, with the idea being on the 10th of April, what I'm going to do then is add in a longer day. I don't know if that's a 2 hour ride, a 3 hour ride, probably not a 4 hour ride. But after 6 weeks, I'm going to add in a longer day and try to make that part of my regular weekly plan. So here's what happens then. If you know you're going to have, from that point on, at least one day a week that's, let's say, a 3 hour day, when you're building that first base, sticking to that 6 hours. You don't want to overdo it. If I know I'm going to be riding 3 hours every Saturday or every weekend or whatever, realistically, that turns into 3 hours per week during the week to maintain that 6 hours. Again, over time, once your base is established, you still want to try to ride every day. But after this 6 week period, for me, if I throw in a longer day each week, and for me, it won't be Saturdays and Sundays. It won't be on the weekend. It'll realistically be in the middle of the week. But this first time, I'm going to try it on a Club Spinistry ride we have scheduled. From that point on, I'll probably work it into a Tuesday or a Wednesday, something from my schedule. But at least through the first 12 weeks, I'm not going to necessarily be overly concerned about riding every day. The focus is going to still be to maintain my 6 hours per week to get through that first 12 weeks, which will end on May 22nd. Now, I could try to add my hours after the 6 weeks if I wanted to, but again, I'm going to try to stick to this 6 hours per week plan that we were talking about. And we'll see I have it as my 6 hour ride weekend now. 6 hours Saturday, 6 hours Sunday is the plan. But again, it's going to be based on the average. So what my average hours per week worked out to, if it ended up being 5, it'll be five hours each day. So this will be the proof in the pudding weekend, is if Kevin's able to ride back-to-back days, May 22nd and May 23rd of 6-ish hours days. And that's the goal, starting from absolutely below zero on fitness level, etc. And from this point forward, assuming everything works out and I'm still on my regular riding schedule, we'll probably up the hours, not necessarily tremendously, but go back to if I'm able to ride in the middle of the week for 3 hours. For a longer ride, still do my 60 minutes each day. What would that work out to? 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 6 hour, 7 hour, 8 hour, 9 hour. Call it a 9 hour week is the goal. And again, the 60 minutes per day is light, moderate effort. And if you're feeling tired, it's light effort. None of these 60-minute days are meant to be rip your legs off intervals or anything like that. Now, after this first 12 weeks, you may want to stay, you may only have time for the 6 hours still. What you can start doing then is incorporating an intervals day in then, sort of thing. But that's next level stuff. Let's get through the first 12 weeks, establish this base where everybody can ride a full weekend of 6 hour days, feel good at the end each day, and start building your adventures from there. Thanks for spending the time with us. Hopefully this helps some folks. If you want us to help you put together something that works for you specifically, just comment below or send us a message or whatever. We're probably going to try to figure out a way to incorporate a form or something for that. If I know it seems straightforward in my head, but I'm sure people will have questions or need some clarification on things to put together a plan for their needs. So module 1 done. Establish that base fitness. Get ready for your adventures. And we'll start talking about the cool and fun parts of bike packing, the equipment and the toys next time around.